Juventus. In 2006, Italian football was rocked by the Calciopoli match-fixing scandal. Juventus, Italy's most successful club, was found to have played a leading role in a referee-influencing scheme and faced unprecedented punishment. The Turin Giants were relegated to Serie B for the first time ever and stripped of 2 recent Serie A titles as a result. Many top players like Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Fabio Cannavaro fled the club after the demotion, and Juventus had to claw their way back from the second division amid a mass exodus of talent. The scandal's fallout left Italian football in turmoil, with lingering effects on finances and reputation. But Juventus eventually rebuilt, despite coming perilously close to total ruin. AC Milan and Lazio. In 1980, Serie A was hit by the Totonero betting scandal, which involved players and executives fixing matches for illegal bookmakers. 2 of Italy's big clubs, AC Milan and Lazio, were found guilty of match fixing and were both relegated from Serie A to Serie B as punishment. Several players, including renowned striker Paolo Rossi, and club officials were banned for years. AC Milan, a storied club, suffered the ignominy of relegation for the second time in its history and financial pain, while Lazio also descended into years of difficulty. The scandal nearly shattered both clubs. Milan even languished in Serie B for multiple seasons in the early 1980s until they eventually fought their way back to the top flight. Olympique Marseille. Marseille's Champions League triumph in 1993 was tarnished by a match-fixing scandal that nearly destroyed the club. Just days before the European Cup final, Marseille's president Bernard Tapie arranged to bribe players of Valenciennes to throw a domestic league game so Marseille could secure the French title without tiring key players. When the scheme came to light, the consequences were dire. Marseille were stripped of their 1992-93 French Division I championship and barred from defending their European crown, and the club was forcibly relegated to Division II the next season. By 1994, Marseille's finances imploded and the club went bankrupt, spending 2 years in the second tier before returning in 1996. The scandal led to lifetime bans for Tapie and other officials, and it gutted the club's reputation and roster, a downfall from which Marseille took years to recover. Rangers. In 2012, Glasgow Rangers, RFC, 54-time Scottish champions, suffered a catastrophic financial collapse that saw the club literally cease to exist in its old form. Years of mismanagement and a massive unpaid tax bill drove Rangers into administration in February 2012. When a takeover deal fell through, the Rangers corporate entity was liquidated, and the club's assets were sold to a new company. As a result, Rangers were expelled from the Scottish Premier League and had to restart in the 4th tier of Scottish football, a spectacular fall from grace for one of Britain's biggest clubs. Ibrox Stadium, normally host to 50,000 fans, saw the team play against semi-pro competition as they climbed back up the division. It took Rangers 4 seasons to return to the top flight, but the near death of this footballing institution sent shockwaves through the sport. Leeds United. Leeds United, a major English club, provides a cautionary tale of reckless spending. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Leeds chased glory by splurging on players and wages to reach the Champions League. They did reach a UCL semi-final in 2001, but when they failed to qualify again, the huge debts peaking around £100 million became unsustainable, triggering a financial meltdown. By 2003 to 2004, Leeds were relegated from the Premier League, having sold off their star players to stay afloat. The crisis deepened. In 2007, Leeds went into administration, the first Premier League club to do so at the time, and were docked points, dropping to the 3rd tier for the first time ever. At one point, the club's situation was so dire that they were nearly expelled from the Football League entirely, until a last-minute deal allowed them back with a 15-point penalty. It took Leeds over a decade in the lower leagues to recover from this near-fatal collapse. Portsmouth. Portsmouth FC's fairy tale 2008 FA Cup win was followed by a nightmare. After that trophy, Pompey's finances fell apart due to overspending, owner turmoil, and mounting debts. In 2010, Portsmouth became the first Premier League club to enter administration, incurring a 9-point deduction and relegation from the top flight. The crises kept coming. By 2012, still weighed down by debt, Portsmouth went into administration again and dropped from the Championship to League One with another points deduction. The club was unable to pay players and staff, narrowly avoiding liquidation more than once. Portsmouth ultimately plummeted to the 4th tier, League Two, in 2013, having suffered multiple relegations due to financial implosions. Only a takeover by a fan's trust saved the club from disappearing entirely. Portsmouth's spectacular collapse from FA Cup winners to near non-existence in a few years stands as a stark warning in English football. Fiorentina, a renowned Italian club, went from European competition to bankruptcy in the span of a year. By 2001, under owner Vittorio Cecchigori, Fiorentina were in dire financial straits, unable to pay wages and roughly $50 million in debt. Despite on-field success, they won the Coppa Italia in 2001. The money had run out. The club was relegated from Serie A in 2002 and then officially declared bankrupt that summer, unable to register for the new season. In fact, Fiorentina's situation was so bad that they were denied a place in Serie B for 2002 to 2003 and effectively ceased to exist as an entity. The century-old club had to be refounded from scratch as Florentia Viola and admitted into the fourth tier Serie C2 in August 2002. Thanks to new owner Diego Della Valle, they climbed back up, regaining the Fiorentina name and returning to Serie A by 2004. But the 2002 collapse remains one of football's worst off-field collapses of a major club. SSC Napoli. Napoli, the club of Diego Maradona's glory days, hit rock bottom in 2004. After years of financial mismanagement following Maradona's era, Napoli had accumulated enormous debts and failed to earn promotion from Serie B. By August 2004, SSC Napoli was declared bankrupt and expelled from the professional leagues. The situation was so dire that the club's entire existence was in jeopardy. The organization was liquidated, leaving the city of Naples without a team in Serie A or B. Italian film producer Aurelio De Laurentiis stepped in to rescue soccer in Naples. He purchased the club's sporting title out of bankruptcy and refounded it under the name Napoli Soccer. Since the old entity had been dissolved, the new Napoli had to restart in Serie C in 2004, essentially beginning from scratch. They eventually earned successive promotions and reclaimed their name and honors, but the bankruptcy of 2004 remains a stunning fall for a club that had been Italian champions just 14 years earlier. Parma was an elite club in the 1990s, winning European trophies, but then suffered two devastating scandals. First, in 2003, the club's parent company Parmalat, Italy's dairy giant, collapsed in a $14 billion fraud, also known as Europe's Enron scandal. Parma's owner, Callisto Tanzi, was arrested for fraud. Parmalat went bankrupt and the club was left insolvent, losing 77 million euros in 2003 alone. Parma was put into special administration and only survived by restructuring and finding new owners in 2004 to 2005. A decade later, however, Parma imploded again. By late 2014, the club couldn't even pay player wages, was sold for €1, and rapidly ran out of money. In March 2015, Parma FC was declared bankrupt with over 200 million euros in debt and could not finish Serie A without emergency help. The team finished bottom and was denied a license in Serie B due to the debts, forcing the club to fold and restart in Serie D as Parma Calcio 1913. It was the second time in 10 years that Parma had essentially collapsed financially. Remarkably, the reborn Parma climbed from Serie D back to Serie A by 2018, but the twin financial scandals nearly erased the club entirely. Atletico Madrid. One of Spain's biggest clubs, Atletico Madrid went through a period in the late 1990s and early 2000 where off-field corruption and mismanagement brought the club to its knees. Longtime president Jesus Gil y Gil treated the club like his fiefdom, but by 1999 to 2000 his practices caught up with Atleti. Gil was implicated in embezzling funds, including diverting city money to the club and committing share fraud in the club's IPO. As courts investigated, Atletico's finances cratered. Debts reached about 80 million euros, and the club could not even pay player wages for months. Gil and his board were suspended, and a judicial administrator took control of the club when Atletico suffered a shock relegation in 2000. The once proud club spent 2 seasons in the second division while fighting off financial collapse. Gil was eventually forced to resign in 2003, allowing new management to stabilize the finances. Atletico's near demise during this era shows how even a famous club can be dragged down by corrupt ownership. They were essentially on the brink until Gil was removed. Borussia Dortmund. In the mid-2000s, Borussia Dortmund, Champions League winners in 1997, came alarmingly close to bankruptcy. The club had spent extravagantly and even became the first and only German club to float on the stock market, but by late 2004, their finances were in ruins. Dortmund's debts swelled to around 150 to 200 million euros. Cash reserves dried up, and the club could not pay players' salaries. In early 2005, Borussia Dortmund was days away from filing for bankruptcy, which would likely have meant relegation and perhaps dissolution. A lifeline came from an unlikely source. Rival Bayern Munich provided Dortmund an emergency €2 million loan to cover short-term wages and keep the club afloat. This quiet bailout, combined with drastic cost-cutting, selling players and even their stadium, saved BVB from collapse. Dortmund then rebuilt under new CEO Hans-Joachim Watzke, but the episode is a stark example of a top club nearly going under. By 2004, Dortmund were on the verge of bankruptcy after years of extravagant spending, only surviving thanks to outside help. Each of these cases, whether due to corruption, fraud, or mismanagement, shows how even massive clubs can be brought to the brink of destruction. These scandals had profound consequences, from forced relegations and voided titles to complete bankruptcies. While most of the clubs listed have since recovered to various extents, the near-death experiences have become part of their lore, serving as lessons for football on the importance of integrity and prudent governance.